let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Terry, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll let Chandler introduce herself, and then we'll go through.
My name is Terry Seferdini, and I am a chemical engineering graduate from UT. I graduated back in 1978, a long time ago. And I've been I changed careers kind of midstream. I started out in the environmental industry, and then about 20 or so years into that, I switched to what I call real engineering, got into EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction work, doing process design, and then I moved into project engineering, which is where you sort of take care of the whole picture, big picture of projects. And then also on the side, I am the engineer's coach. So I help engineers with their career related issues. Done a lot of stuff with job search over the years and just making sure that people end up in the place where they need to be.
Hi, I'm Chandler, and I work at Texas Instruments. So we're in the semiconductor industry, surprisingly, if you still think we are in just the calculator industry. But I've been at TI for coming up on 6 years now. I am a UT grad, not of engineering, but I went to the Moody College of Communication and got my communication studies degree. So I've been in various HR roles at TI since I joined via a rotation program. And while I'm not an engineer, in my role in recruiting, I spend most of my time talking with either engineering students, engineers at TI, hiring managers, as well as faculty and staff of the awesome universities that I get to partner with, like UT. So I feel like I've learned a lot just about what we do and what we make and what it takes to work at TI, just via osmosis and how I interact with different types of people. So looking forward to the topic today. It's something that I'm really passionate about, of course, being in the recruiting world, and whether you're making a positive impression in an interview or a job setting or any type of setting, really. I think it'll be fun to talk about. I'm so excited to get to know you.
Thanks, Chandler. And Texas Instruments is one of our big partners for our workshop series this year. So thank you to TI and Chandler for getting volunteers galore to come and join in all of these programs. Well, let's talk positive first impressions, because as Chandler mentioned, I think this is a topic that hits just about every area of your life, right? Regardless of your situation, you're making first impressions all the time in all kinds of different spaces. And so maybe we start with Terry and Chandler, just sharing a little bit about their thoughts about positive first impressions, and what does that mean? What does that mean to them, and what are maybe a few tips that they might have for y'all to kick things off? Chandler, do you want to start?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. I think, when I think back to when I was, we can talk about it in kind of a recruiting setting first, and maybe apply it to other formats, whether it be meeting with a faculty member that you're interested in partnering with on research, or whether it be with a new student org that you've joined and you want to make the right impression there, or ultimately if you're trying to secure an internship or a job with the company. Not to make it, I think there's a lot of pressure around positive first impressions, because there's first impressions mean everything, or, you never forget the first impression. And I could think of all kinds of phrases, right, that we've all heard. And it just kind of adds that little bit of anxiety around it, around well, gosh, if I don't make the first impression, then it's just kind of over, right? And, I want to try to not think of it in that way. But practice makes perfect, especially in the recruiting setting. I can't tell you how many, when I was a student, I had a lot of anxiety around the recruiting process. And I thought that it was almost similar to dating, right? It's oh, let me make them like me and make them want to call me, and, but don't call them back too fast. And, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I went to plenty of career fairs and just practiced with a company that I had never even heard of or wasn't even that interested in, but just practice talking to them and making a first impression. And if I bombed it, it was okay, because, I probably wouldn't see that person again. So I think starting off with some of those maybe low pressure scenarios to get you practice and introducing yourself, and maybe saying a little bit about yourself, like the three of you just did today, right? And I think virtually it can be a little bit different as well on, okay, I'm in this Zoom call and, you know, I'm going to be introducing myself. We've probably done that 100 times by now, whether it be in a class or another setting on, hey, like Trisha just did, right? Like, tell me about yourself. And what are you going to say? And you kind of get to a point where it just feels natural, where you include like the basic information about yourself and then maybe what you're interested in doing. And, you know, I think the three of you really did that really seamlessly. So you've clearly had some practice in the virtual space. But I think that something else to consider virtually is other things like email and like phone calls or texts, just transitioning to the corporate world. There are different client groups that I work with at TI that place emphasis on different areas, right? Some groups, like let's just take email as an example. Like if I'm new to supporting a certain team or a certain school and I send it and someone sends me an email with some question or a request, I might not know this ahead of time, but if I can reply back to someone's email within a matter of like an hour, right, that's going to make a huge positive impression on that person versus maybe someone else, it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But I like to err on the side of caution and to kind of show if it's the first time I'm interacting with someone virtually via email, doing something like taking time to respond as quick as possible is a great way to make an impression really subtly. Even if it's just something quick, if you don't know the answer, right? Hey, I'm working on it. I'll get right back to you. But that does show that person that, wow, you know, I don't know who this person is, but they got back to my email really quickly, and you can kind of build that rapport from there. So there's just kind of subtle things that you can do. I don't want to ramble too much and not let Terry add to it, but those are just kind of, and I feel like there's different applications for making impressions, whether it be in person or virtual or who you're trying to impress. But there are different things that you can transfer no matter what the audience or setting is.
Oh, thanks, Chandler. Terry.
Of course, I agree with everything that Chandler just said. All of those are great tips. And, you know, I could go into full-blown coaching mode here and give you a whole bunch of, you know, tips and strategies and stuff. But, you know, just adding on to what Chandler said, you know, if you're in an interview situation, to write a thank you note afterwards is an easy way to make a good impression. I mean, you know, or just even a quick email, just responding to just say thank you for your time. You know, I'm really interested in the position, and I look forward to hearing back from you. But you know, just going through just taking that and one action will make you stand out and make a positive impression. And just remembering, you know, sometimes we're worried about ourselves and we're thinking too much about ourselves and we're worried about making a good impression. And oftentimes if we take the focus off of ourselves, well, almost every time we take the focus off ourselves, we're going to do better. So, you know, for one thing, the other person may be as nervous as you are if you're worried about that. And that's not something that we tend to be thinking about. We're so concerned about our own actions and what kind of response we might get. But the other person could be in the same boat as you are. Another thing to keep in mind is, and this is something I stress a lot when it comes to networking, because especially for engineers, you know, who tend to be more introverted, networking can sound like a dirty word. it's scary. But that's for most people, that's because we feel like we're coming at it, we're trying to get something from people, and how do we go about, you know, doing that in a way that's nice and not sounding too needy. Networking and any kind of interaction with people, if you have the idea that if you come at it from the point of view of how can I help? What can I do for you, whoever it is, that right there is going to put you in a different place mentally and going to make you more likely to be able to give a good impression. So, you know, even especially like in a job interview type situation, knowing what the company is all about and seeing and knowing how you might fit into that, into their mission, And speaking to that will help you feel a lot more confident and give you the chance to make a positive first impression. Because again, most people come in with the idea of what can I get? What am I going to get? As opposed to what you can provide to them to meet their needs. So it's basic, in many ways, it's basic consideration and a spirit of generosity, I guess is how I put it.
Those are awesome things that y'all shared. I think just adding a little bit onto what Terry was saying, you know, one of the things I usually share when I have this conversation is to also think about, you know, what's the purpose of this interaction, you know, especially if it's in that kind of business world or that academic space where you're heading in to try to accomplish something, right? Or that you're part of a meeting where everyone's there for some sort of a gathering or purpose or common goal, whatever it may be. And remembering what that is somewhere in the back of your brain.
Yeah,
I totally agree. When I first started at TI, I didn't really have a concept of what your introduction is outside of, okay, what's my name and what's my major and when do I graduate? And so when I started at TI, people would say, oh, well, tell me about yourself. A couple of times, I feel like I just told my life story, right? Like I'm from here, I went to elementary school here, high school here, I went to UT, and then I did this, and then I did that. And it's like, okay, concise, right? I did not know what just like in the professional world, you know, outside of like, you know, my major and everything just kind of defined me. But outside of that, I mean, what's your elevator pitch, I guess, in a different setting. So yeah, knowing your audience and who you're introducing yourself to is key.
right.
With a big company like TI, if I'm meeting with, you know, a group of engineers in the marketing space or a group of like leaders in this other area, you do kind of tailor your introduction that way. But a lot of what is centered around at TI is, oh yeah, hi, I'm Chandler. I've been at TI for 6 years. I'm currently in this role, and I focus on this, right? It kind of starts, and some people don't really want to maybe share how many years they've been at TI if it's longer than I've been alive, as an example. Like there are people at the company that way, and then if I say, oh, 6 years, and someone says, oh, 30 years, right? You know, it's a little varied there, but that's pretty common. Is I'll just kind of say, you know, who I am, what role I'm in, and then potentially how long you've been at TI. And then, I mean, just most recently being virtual, something that's fun to kind of share is maybe where you're working from, since a lot of us are maybe based out of Dallas, which is our headquarters, but I actually moved to Austin. Then, you know, I live here, so maybe sharing, oh, I'm working from Colorado this week because I could, or something fun to kind of add. And then based on the context of whatever the meeting that you're in is, maybe if you have prior experience in that area or why you're at that meeting that day, to kind of give a little bit of context of, okay, why am I here, right? And what value can I add?
As far as how I would introduce myself, I'm gonna turn around a little bit, because how I introduce myself, the answer is basically the same as what Chandler would say. Depends on, you know, what group I'm in. But you bring up a question that is very, very common in interviews, and that is the question of, tell me a little bit about yourself. And that's an important question to know how to answer. One, because it comes up so frequently, and two, most people at least, you know, initially will trip over it because they don't know how to answer it properly. And what they want to know in that time when they ask that question is not your life story. They want to know how you're going to really fit in at their business. And the way you answer that is to tell a little bit about some projects you've worked on that's related to the work you're applying, the job you're applying for, if that makes sense to you. So, you know, if you've been working before in a job, then you may have some job experience that, in your cases, coming out of school, you could speak to projects that you have done that demonstrate your ability to do that particular kind of work that you're applying for. And that's, that one will really make a good impression because like I said, so many people get that wrong in an interview situation.
When you get those kinds of questions in an interview, or you're having even a conversation with someone that you're just meeting and they ask you those questions, well, how'd you get into engineering, or how'd you get interested in engineering? The common response, the kind of more boring response is, well, I love math and science in high school. Well, great, so did everybody. So how can you answer that kind of question in a way that really speaks to your experiences or your passions or your interests of how you want to make the world a better place down the road, and tie it into that? Because the math and science alone isn't going to necessarily drive you all the way to get that engineering degree. Speaking from experience, as a chemical engineer who really ended up not liking chemistry at all through college, it wasn't the chemistry nor the love of chemistry that drove me to get that degree. It was what I could go out and do with that degree. And so kind of flipping that question and not answering with the standard same old can give that different first impression from others.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that as well, especially when I first started interviewing. And like I had kind of said, I was a first generation college student. I didn't have a lot of background from my parents on, okay, here's how a corporate interview works and polishing your resume and what do I do with my hair. And thankfully I was able to utilize a lot of their resources at UT. But at the end of the day, that's still you that's having those conversations and putting yourself in that. And I think it's kind of an unpopular answer, so take it at face value. But I think my kind of mantra inside a lot of the times was, okay, fake it till you make it, right? Like I might not feel like I'm ready for this. I don't know if this person is going to have any idea what I'm talking about. I don't really know what their company even does, but I'm going to pretend like I do and like show up and having that, portraying that confidence, even if you might not feel it inside. I found myself kind of owning into that. And the more successful interactions that I had, the more I actually felt that confidence and I wasn't faking it anymore. Right. And I don't want to advocate for pretending to be anyone you're not in any type of scenario, or feeling like you have to put on a mask in any type of interaction. But I did feel like, okay, it might not feel like I'm the most confident right now, but I'm going to just pretend that I am and get through it. Right. I know that might not be the most popular answer, but at the end of the day, like that's what I found. And that's what sticks out to me 6 years later as what helped me in those types of settings that I wasn't as comfortable with.
I approach it a little bit differently. First of all, do y'all know what a confident person looks like? Have you seen a confident person? Can you picture one in your mind? What they would do, how they would act? Well, what I suggest to people is that they act as if. So instead of faking it, where you can feel like you can't, that you are fake, just act, think of somebody in your mind who is confident and somebody that you would want to be like, and then just act like that. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes, right? So eventually you will be confident because you've learned to act as if you're somebody who is confident. And another way to do that too is to get real clear on why you have reasons to be confident. One of the things that I have, all my clients do is do a list of their strengths. So do you know what your strengths are? Can you make a list of at least 20 of your strengths? People freak out and no, I can't come up with that many, but we all have a large list of strengths that we don't give ourselves credit for. Partly because we've been kind of taught not to brag. It's arrogant to focus on ourselves, but it's not arrogant to have a good understanding of what it is that we bring to the table. Just knowing what your strengths are keeps you from dealing with your weaknesses all the time. Focus on your strengths, not on your weaknesses. But you have strengths, and the other thing about those strengths, oftentimes you don't recognize them because something may come to you so easily, you assume that everybody knows how to can do it, and that's not necessarily the case. So sometimes you might have to ask some other people what your strengths are, just because you're blind to them. But coming to any kind of interaction, like we're talking about when it comes to job, especially in job search situations, but any circumstance, when you know truly what you are capable of and what you bring to the table, it will give you a place where you can to come from to be more confident, and therefore to show up as more confident. Your body can help you act as if, just like you said, right? Just putting a smile on your face, it's been proven, makes you feel happier. You can not feel like you're all that happy, but you put a smile on your face, you will feel at least somewhat happier. You may not be giddy at that moment, but you'll feel happier. Put yourself standing up straight, sitting up straight, with like she was saying in the power pose. It really does make a difference.
If it's a phone call or like on Zoom, just think about how your inflection sounds if your mouth is like this versus down, right? It's even just like subtle things like that can make a difference.
People can hear a smile over the phone. And another thing that I have done always is, I don't care if I'm working at home, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to get up and get dressed for work. Now I might not put on, the fancy power suit or anything like that, but I'm dressed nicely for work, whether I'm going to see somebody or not, because people can hear it in your voice on the phone. It makes a huge difference. The only slot they had left was at 5 o'clock in the evening. And I'm thinking, getting ready for that interview, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to be so tired. They had a full slate all day of people they were going to be talking to. And so my first thought was, oh my gosh, they're going to be so tired of talking to people. They're not going to really be interested in talking to me at that time of day. Or they probably already found somebody they liked by that point, right? So it was kind of pointless, but I went ahead and did it. But I went in with a joke. I went in and I said to these guys, it wasn't really a joke. I decided the best defense was a good offense. So I went in and stuck out my hand. It was two guys from the Texas Air Control Board at that time. I stuck out my hand and shook their hands, and I said, boy, I bet you guys are ready to go home right now. But you're tired of all this, aren't you? And then they said, yeah, and it kind of broke the ice. And then we sat down, we did the interview, and lo and behold, I got the offer from them. And one of the two became my boss. And he told me later, and every time he told the story, it kind of got funnier, because he said, you got that job because you came in, here's the end of the day, and you kind of swaggered on in, you stuck your hand out and said, hey boys, But the point is that, I did intentionally take, that position. I knew I was in a negative slot being there at that time of day. So the best thing to do was just kind of acknowledge it and just go with the flow. And they hadn't seen anything like that all day long. And that was just, I wasn't, it wasn't that I was trying to game them or anything like that. That's just more my way of approaching things. I like people in general anyway. But, if you're going to plan it, that's a good kind of way to approach things. So.
Well, and I like what you just said there, that, it's your nature is to kind of be that kind of person anyway. And so playing into that and making the most of that can make a positive first impression.
Right. But I was nervous. I was nervous going in, but they didn't realize it, so yeah.
If that's not your comfort zone to go in like that, then it would come off as very awkward, perhaps. So you still have to play within your, your personality and your demeanor and what you are able to, as if the confidence through.
Yeah.
Well, any last words of wisdom, Chandler or Terry, that you want to share with our fabulous students and all of those who will watch after?
I agree that Amy Cuddy taught Trisha is just amazing. Highly recommend. There's countless resources through ECAC, student orgs, and other programming that WEP puts on, and opportunities to just have one-on-one conversations with people like me or Terry or other classmates and people that you interact with, where you can have that experience. And like Pauline was saying, practicing with your friends, practicing with others, saying these things out loud is the best way to get that experience and to improve. I used to think that even with like presentations, right, if I wrote it down and read it in my head as if I was saying it, that would be enough. But it's definitely not, right? So just practice makes progress, and definitely there's you're in a really great place with lots of great resources to continue to improve.
Yeah. I pretty much would echo the same thing. I will throw out one caution, and that is practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So when you start practicing, get feedback and make sure that you're doing things, the way they need to be done, and then practice that.
You all had some phenomenal tips. Thank you, Chandler. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, students.